You've spelunked into the Mat Cave.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Mat Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. We made it through Rivalry Week. We made it through the Holy War. And yes, in fact, the sun did come up the day after the game. Life will move on. And no, the end of the world is not near. At least not because your favorite team lost or won. Maybe for other reasons, but, whatever. So we made it through all of it. And we can all calm down. We can stop with the threats, the death threats, the pointless name-calling, all of that other stuff, and just move on with the rest of the season. So I'll recap the game here in a little bit, but we're also going to go over Real Salt Lake somehow backing themselves into the playoffs against my expectations. So that streak, that 4-season streak is now extended to 5. 5 in a row where Real Salt Lake has appeared in the playoffs. That's a stat I'm pretty sure no soccer fan in the U.S. would ever get. So, they've got that going for them. And I will also go over Utah State's victory over San Jose State, where that puts them in the Mountain West Conference standings, and if I think they can sneak their way into the Mountain West Conference Championship game. Spoilers, I don't. But that's where we're at. So thank you all so much for being here. As always, like, comment, subscribe, update, wherever it is, however you listen. Helps me out a ton. And as always, spelunkers, my dear spelunker, please share this show with just one person that you think might enjoy the program. I don't need you to blast it on social media. That would be really nice of you and kind of you to do so. But just share it with one person that you think would enjoy the program. That helps out a lot, and it means more to that person that you're recommending it to, rather than just, say, plopping it on your Facebook or Instagram. Just introduce it and tell them, hey, I think you'd like it. So, thank you all again for everything you've done and everything that you do. And let's get into things. So let's start with Real Salt Lake. I said it was a win and you're in situation because I thought either San Jose or Colorado were going to win their final match of the season. I was wrong. It was a draw and you're in, apparently, for Real Salt Lake. And actually, the game started out really well for them because they were up 2-0 at halftime. And you figure against a team that's towards the bottom of the standings, that win is going to hold. And Utah is going to be, a -9 goal differential, 44 points. So they're not going to move up in the standings at all. But they're going to look a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more like a playoff team if they could hold on to that tune. It didn't happen. In fact, Real Salt Lake did almost everything they could to lose the game in the second half, short of getting red cards. That's how close it got for Real Salt Lake. They had 3 yellow cards. They gave up 7 corner kicks. They gave up 28 shot attempts. That's not a misprint. This is not a hockey game. It's a soccer match or football match. They gave up 28. They, on the other hand, Real Salt Lake only had 8 shot attempts. Real Salt Lake gave up 7 shots on goal in this game. Yeah. By all accounts and purposes, Real Salt Lake did not deserve to win this game, and they didn't win it. They drew it by the skin of their teeth, and they are in the playoffs. They go up against Portland. They go to Oregon for that game. It is a 1-game playoff before they get into the playoffs proper. So whoever wins that match between Portland and Real Salt Lake then moves on to face off against somebody. It doesn't really matter who they face off against because they're going to lose that game if it's Real Salt Lake. So Real Salt Lake gets into the playoffs. Amazing stuff. It's crazy to me how they got in. If you'll remember, I said they were not going to make it into the playoffs at all, even with Diego Luna. I also said Diego Luna was going to be leaving in the transfer window. That didn't happen. So Real Salt Lake is just a conundrum that nobody could really figure out. I don't even think Pablo Mastroeni knows how to figure out the conundrum that is Real Salt Lake. But here we are. And I don't know if you would call it a successful season. I mean, anytime you make the playoffs, it's better than not making the playoffs. But when 9 of the, 16 teams in your conference make the playoffs, it's more than half. I know math is hard for me, but I at least could do that much. And that's, yeah. So congratulations to Real Salt Lake. You made the playoffs. Your reward is going to a place where you rarely win, which is Portland. And your road record is, well, let's just say it's less than stellar. It's to refresh you. Their away record, well, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to refresh you because it's just depressing. So, Real Salt Lake got into the playoffs. Yay! I guess. I don't know. But let's move on. That's enough about that. Let's move on to Utah State facing off against San Jose State in a home game on a Friday night. And it was a weird one. Congratulations to Bryson Barnes, by the way. He led the Aggies to the win, and then he also became a dad. So that's pretty cool. He went straight from the game to the hospital. And when you hear that, you go, uh-oh. Punctured lung, lacerated something or other, kidney, broken ribs. No, it was actually good news. It was his wife. He's now a happy father. Mother and baby are doing well as well. So that's a big old congratulations to him. And the Aggies got the win over San Jose State. San Jose State, when you were going into the season, some were picking him, including Phil Steele. They were picking San Jose State second in the Mountain West. That prediction is not looking very good there, Phil. But so San Jose State is sitting at 2-5, 1-2 in the Mountain West. By all accounts and purposes, they are done. Utah State still alive in the Mountain West Conference race. And if we look at the standings here, they are sitting at 2-1, which is just behind Hawaii at 3-1, who blew the doors off of Utah State, and San Diego State, who's looking really good defensively, but really bad offensively. If you look at the points for and against for San Diego State, they've played 6 games. They've scored a total of 89 points. That's not great. And they've only given up 34. So they don't score a lot, but they also don't give up a lot. That's a very boring team to watch. And then obviously you got Boise State up there, number 1, 3-0. It's Boise State's conference. Everybody else is just living in it. And UNLV is tied with Utah State at 2-1. So basically what we're looking at here is a Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber looking at us and saying, so you're telling me there's a chance. Yeah, there is a chance. But looking at Utah State's remaining schedule, it's not necessarily easy. They've got to go to Vegas to face off against UNLV. They close out the season against Boise State, and they have to travel to Fresno after the Vegas game to go up against a Fresno State team that is always very solid. Maybe Utah State hits bowl eligibility. They've already matched their win total that I predicted for them this year at 4. They beat a couple of teams I didn't think they'd beat, like San Jose State and Air Force. I didn't think Utah State was going to win those ones. And their offense is pretty good. They're tied for 37th in the country at 34 points per game. It's just that their defense is still really bad. No change from last season, really. They give up 31.6 per game, which is less than they score, which is basically the goal in all sports occasions. But they're tied for 119th in that statistic there. For a coach that prides himself on being defensive-minded, it's not very good. Not saying that he didn't have a lot to work with, but when you suspend your best defensive player to start the season, that doesn't do very well for you. Now, moving forward for Utah State, looking back as well, obviously they did play against Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, both highly ranked. Vanderbilt just beat LSU. Texas A&M is basically undefeated. So it's 2 of their losses are 2 very good teams. And then their third loss is against Hawaii. So if you look at it that way, it's actually a very successful season, especially if Utah State could get to bowl eligibility. I would think that would be a Herculean effort from Bronco Mendenhall and his staff to get that done. And games against Nevada and New Mexico are both very winnable. But Utah State has proven one thing. They're not that good away from home. And when you have to travel to Vegas to face off against the UNLV squad that is very good, they also give up a lot of points, so it could be a shootout. And then have to travel to Fresno State, 8:30 p.m. kickoff. You know what I mean? So 4 wins already. That matched my season prediction total for Utah State. That's great. Is it possible they reach bowl eligibility? Absolutely. Against New Mexico and Nevada, it'll be very close games on both of them. But Utah State could pull those out. The rest of the games, I don't think they have a chance. So these next 2 games are your bowl eligibility for Utah State. That's where we're at. So Utah State beats San Jose State 30-25 in a very odd game on a Friday night. And they move on now to travel to New Mexico and Albuquerque to face off against the Lobos, where Bronco Mendenhall did spend 1 season. we'll see what happens there. New Mexico has surprised a couple of teams this year. All right, so let's move it along. And by the way, that New Mexico game is a 1 p.m. kickoff. Hey, no need for Diet Coke there, huh? All right, so let's move on now. I'm going to save the Holy War for last. So I'm changing gears a little bit here. I'm not going to lump all of the football together. I'm going to move on to the Mammoth. And I really loved what I saw from the Mammoth in their 2 home games against Calgary and San Jose. A combined scoreline of 9-4. And seeing Nick Schmaltz get a hat trick, seeing Captain Keller get a hat trick in assists and score his first goal of the season, I think that removes the lid on the goal for the Mammoth, and I think their offense is going to be successful moving forward. Now, as of me recording this, I have not yet seen the Boston Bruins game because that hasn't happened yet. That happens tonight as of me recording this, and then they also have to face off against Colorado at home, where if we look at Colorado's performance throughout the year, if we just look at their score lines, Utah is the team that gave up the least amount of goals to the Avalanche. Here are the other games, the goals scored for the Avalanche. I'm not going to give you the full score, but for the Avalanche have scored 4-4, 3, 4-2, and 4. Against the Mammoth, that was at home for Colorado. It was also the Mammoth's very first game of the season. That's encouraging. I'm not going to say that Utah's only going to give up 2 goals against Colorado in this next one because Colorado's on fire. But when you look at the defensive structure for Utah, even with Sean Durzi going out, the defensive structure is still very solid and very strong. There are still hiccups when it comes to scrums in the corner for the puck. The younger guys tend to drift too close, and so if Utah doesn't win that scrum for the puck and it gets launched out to the opposing team, that guy is wide open for a shot on net, and there's basically nothing Karel Vejmelka can do in that instance. When that doesn't happen, though, they don't really give up bad goals. They've given up some power play goals. You just expect that. But overall, I've been very encouraged by what I've seen from this Utah team, even though they have had struggles scoring the puck, getting the puck into the net. I mean, if we look at Utah's goals scored over the first few games of the seasons, 6 against San Jose, 3-1, 3-1. That's not great. But having Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller scoring goals, having Michael Carcone score a goal, Liam O'Brien, Spicy Tuna, one of my favorite players, scored his first goal in a Utah jersey, whether it was the hockey club or Mammoth. That's going to ignite the team. And moving forward, this team is a playoff team, and they play fast, they play above, they play a very exciting brand of hockey that's just fun to watch, and their goal scorers are only going to get better as the season goes along. I have Clayton Keller pegged to score 100 points. I still think he's going to be able to do that. And then Dylan Gunther on the Utah Mammoth Daily podcast that I do on YouTube. Go check it out, Utah Mammoth Daily. I also predicted Dylan Gunther to score 40-plus goals. And I also predicted Logan Cooley to play well enough to get a very expensive contract from Utah. And so far, it's looking like I'm right. Logan Cooley hasn't really been showing up on the stat sheet, but he's been showing up on the ice, getting dirty, hitting people, doing the dirty work, not taking the shot for himself, but passing it to the guy who has a better opportunity, like in that 5-on-3 power play against the Sharks. So this team is on the rise, and everyone that's doubting them in the national media just hasn't been paying attention. They just haven't been watching Utah Mammoth hockey. That hot streak to end last season has bled into the start of this season, and it's only going to be up from here. I'm not saying that Utah is going to win every game this year. There's 82 games. That's stupid. But they're going to be competitive in every game. I don't really see them getting blown out. You see that 3-1 scoreline against the Blackhawks. That wasn't a blowout. It was 2-1. And then Utah pulled their goalie to try to get the game even, and Chicago scored an empty netter. So it was really another 2-1 loss. So if you look at their 2 games that they've lost to Chicago and Colorado, it was basically a score of 2-1 in both games. I'm very high on the Utah Mammoth this year. I think they're going to make the playoffs. And anybody who's watched hockey before knows that once you make the playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, anything can happen. Anything. And that's what Utah needs. Karel Vejmelka and Vitek Vanacek have both been outstanding to start the season. And I just see it rolling on from here. They're going to lose games. That's going to be fine. This isn't football. 1 loss doesn't derail your season. 2 losses doesn't derail your season. And you win the games you're supposed to win, and you sneak points away from teams like Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, Winnipeg, and that's how you get into the playoffs. And this young team is poised to get there, and they really serve the herd mentality very well. In that game against San Jose, the game was over. Logan Cooley and the young budding star of the Sharks, Macklin Celebrini, they got tied up against the boards. Their sticks got tied up, in the bodies of each other, and neither one of them really wanted to be the first one to untangle. And so there was a little pushing and shoving. Logan Cooley, as he was getting up, shoved Macklin Celebrini's head into the ice. Hey, basically, Rook, this is the NHL. And his teammates took exception to it. And then the camera angle ESPN Plus had for the ensuing scrum, I guess, it wasn't really a fight. It was just pushing and shoving. It was hockey. You see big old number 26, Dmitry Simashev, the rookie, barreling down the ice to back up his teammates. Not only that, you saw Mikhail Sergachev doing the same thing. Last year, he wasn't really that guy because he was too important, and I am sure the front office and the coaching staff told him to stay on the fringes of it. This year, Sergachev was in the middle of it. So Dylan Gunther was there. JJ Paterka even was pulling guys. So it's herd mentality for sure, and this team cares about each other, and they want to win. And I see that every night. The shots just weren't going in a lot of those early games. There was bad puck luck, and there was a lid on the net. But I think they opened the door. They took the lid off the net, and there's going to be some really fun games ahead. So I am welcome to anybody and everybody that wants to be on the Utah Mammoth bandwagon. There's plenty of room, and if you fall off, that's fine. I will still welcome you back when they make the playoffs later this season. Awesome stuff for the Utah Mammoth. I'm very excited about it. And I do a daily podcast over on YouTube called Utah Mammoth Daily. If you want to check that out, you can see me on camera if you want to subject yourself to that. All right, now it's the Holy War. Let's talk about BYU Utah down in Provo. A finally primetime kickoff for this game, not some stupid 8:15, 8:30 kickoff that's been the case the past few meetings. And this game was weird, just like all Holy Wars are. And this one was weird in its own right. In the first half, it was a pretty even contest. It really was. 10-7 going into the half. Terrible clock management, again, by Kalani Sitake. And bad play calling from Aaron Roderick, again, at the end of that first half. Made it so that BYU didn't really have a chance to score a touchdown, and they had to settle for a field goal. So 10-7 going into the half. Utah's running offense was solid, if unspectacular. They were kind of throwing the ball, but BYU was doing a good job of keeping Devin Dampier in the pocket, forcing him to beat BYU with his arm. And he was kind of doing that, but the one touchdown pass came from a broken play in that first half to Ryan Davis. And so that was, like, Robert Griffin III was fantastic on the call. He was so good. I love listening to RG3 when he's not calling a Baylor game. When he's not calling a Baylor game, he's one of the best guys out there for college football. So listening to him, and he's like, yeah, Utah scored a passing touchdown, but it was like a backyard football play. It was two guys that know each other, and they just kind of found the empty spot. That wasn't schemed. And I agree with that. The other touchdown pass at the end of the game, that was schemed, and it was very well done by Jason Beck and the offensive line for Utah, giving Devin Dampier and his receiver, Larry Simmons, enough time to get him across the field to lose his defender in the wash and score that touchdown. I have a lot of quibbles here, though. First, with BYU. So I'll start on the BYU side, the victor's side. I'll start with my critiques and praises here. My praises are for Bear Bachmeier. Bear Bachmeier is not playing like a true freshman right now. He really isn't. And that has to do with coaching as well as the senior leadership of the team. So Bear Bachmeier is playing entirely within the offense. Entirely within it. And what I've been really impressed with BYU is they're not asking the kid to go out and be Superman and do everything for them. That is the flip side of Utah. where Utah, the past few years, it's superhero ball from your quarterback. Have a solid running game and expect superhero ball from your quarterback. I don't think that's too out there for you to say. For BYU, that used to be the case, right? John Beck, Max Hall, Taysom Hill, Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall. You go down the list, and we want our quarterback to be the hero. And now Kalani Sitake has flipped the script a little bit. And this season, he has put the onus on the rest of the team to step up. Offensive line, play above. Play above what people think you are and play together. Receiving core, hold on to the ball. Do not drop it. Tight ends, block. You're going to be needed to block. And then if you can, get out there on a route, make sure you hang on to the ball, and LJ Martin carry the team. And that's what's happened through the first 7 games of the season. And I have been much maligned of Aaron Roderick throughout my time on this podcast. But this season, he's doing a wonderful job. He really is. The entire offensive staff is doing a wonderful job around the kid. Are there reads that he's missing? Absolutely 100%. He needs to get rid of the ball faster, but that's going to come with time, with reps, with watching film. That'll come. Right now, he's just not making the big mistake. He's not forcing the issue. And the one time he did against Utah, he got bailed out from a, air quotes, holding call. I'll get to the refereeing at the end of the episode. Don't worry, Utah fans. Don't worry, Cougar fans. I will get to the refereeing at the end of this. So the offense for BYU, I think, has done a wonderful job. LJ Martin is an all Big 12 running back. Borderline All-American. He is very good. It takes more than one guy to bring him down. If you're going for his legs, you're not taking him down by yourself. He bounces off of tackles and he falls forward. It's very rare, and it did happen against Utah a couple times, but it's very rare that he falls backwards when he's carrying the rock. So that basically what I'm saying here is the offense, while unspectacular, has been good enough. Now, the defense, holy moly, I was not expecting this defense to show up the way it did against Utah. If you look just at the box score and you don't look at the game, you think, well, Matt, why are you saying that? BYU almost gave up 500 yards of offense. True. That's what the box score says. But that was within the 20s. That was between the 20s. When it got time to buoy up, 4th and short, 2 times, BYU stood up. In the past, that didn't happen. In the past, BYU would have gotten rolled over. The middle of the defense was stout. And I'm talking Keanu Tanavasa, a guy that I called out last week. He had a great game. He did. And it's not going to show up on the stat sheet. But he was a rock in the middle of that defense. They were not moving him. Him and John Taumoepeau weren't getting moved that often against Utah. And then obviously you got your Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker, Logan Latui, Tanner Wall, Falateu Satuwala. They played outstanding football. And then Maury Bamba on that 4th down tackle, outstanding stuff. So this defense that Jay Hill has crafted has taken from a passive unit that was bend but don't break and broke a lot under Ilaisa Tuiaki into a unit that is one of the best in the Big 12, if not the country, is nothing short of miraculous. They got 3 sacks. Now, I do want to call something out here. After that 4th down stop, when Devin Dampier ran on the quarterback power, he's hurt. He's not going to admit that he was hurt. Kyle Whittingham did not admit that he was hurt. He said, you're going to have to ask Devin Dampier about it. But he was hurt. He was limping. And it's something I noticed, especially on that deep ball that was intercepted by Tanner Wall. He couldn't drive the ball. The ball floated on him. If he drives that ball, it's an incomplete pass. I don't think that pass is getting completed, but it's not a turnover. So there's definitely, and then in that second half, Devin Dampier didn't run. And even when he could have sprung out of the pocket, got a few yards, he didn't do that either. He stayed in the pocket trying to complete a pass. So Devin Dampier was hurt. I don't care what anybody says. He was limping. and nobody said anything. So that changed everything in the second half, and Jay Hill noticed that. In the first half, Jay Hill was reticent to send a blitz because he wanted to make sure that Devin Dampier stayed in the pocket. In the second half, Devin Dampier did that for Jay Hill, and Jay Hill noticed it, and he sent blitzes, and they got home. Because Utah's skill positions outside of Devin Dampier just were not talented enough on their own to beat the BYU secondary, which is very odd for me to say because BYU secondary has always been its Achilles heel. It's always soft zone coverage with stunts on the defensive line to try to get to the quarterback and hope that nobody pops the top off the defense. That's been BYU's MO for years. Now, not so much. So, kudos to both coordinators on a fantastic game, great game plans, and I said this at the end of the game to one of my friends who's kind of flipped in the rivalry. We've known each other since like the 8th grade, 7th grade, and we've been friends ever since. He was diehard BYU almost as much as me growing up. He married a Ute, and now he's a Ute fan. So that's how that went. And we noticed that this game was what Utah used to do to BYU, which was punch you in the mouth, see how you respond. If you don't respond, continue punching. And that was the run game for BYU. Now, let's move it over to Utah. I did not expect this. I thought Utah was going to come in with a great game plan, both offensively and defensively. They were going to roll BYU like they had in the past and come out with a victory. It wasn't going to be a steamroll. It wasn't going to be a 52-10, but it was going to be a win. That didn't happen. And I think a lot of it had to do with Devin Dampier getting injured or re-injuring or aggravating whatever his previous injury that happened against Texas Tech. The passing game for Utah is just not good. It's not good. They have one guy. They have Ryan Davis, and even he is not all-conference caliber. He's just comfortable knowing what Devin Dampier does. He's comfortable knowing where that ball is going to go. And when teams have figured that out, where else do you go with the ball? Tobias Merriweather could be better. J.J. Buchanan made a couple of nice grabs. Dallin Bentley made a couple of nice grabs. But if it weren't for a lucky, positioning, there was a fumble in there that could have turned the tide of the game. The defense stood tall throughout most of the game. There weren't really any busted coverages. BYU couldn't get behind Utah, but the way that Aaron Roderick called the game against Morgan Scalley was really good because he got the defenders, Aaron Roderick got Utah's defenders to care so much about the run that the linebackers were constantly caught coming forward, and Aaron Roderick was able to sneak Parker Kingston and Chase Roberts and even Carson Ryan a little bit behind the linebackers, and Bear Bachmeier was able to make those easy reads to hit those receivers. This was a different Utah team than what I'm used to seeing. And I think it has to go with this thing that Kyle Whittingham has fallen into since about 2021. And that's the quarterback position, where even before that, with Tyler Huntley, it's I need a hero ball quarterback, a solid run game, and a top 10 defense. That's how I win. He's got the top 10 defense. He has a solid running game, but the quarterback play has just been getting progressively worse. Nobody fears Devin Dampier as a passer of the football. Nobody does. And that's what happened against BYU. Jay Hill said, all right, kid, beat me. And he couldn't. So overall, this game was weird to watch. It was fun to watch. And now this is going to be a little bit longer of an episode because of the Holy War. Let's get to that crappy officiating. Both ways. They missed calls like crazy. And they made bad makeup calls for that. On that last drive for Utah, the 2 defensive pass interference penalties, they were not pass interference. The one in the end zone was hand fighting between a receiver and a defensive back. That's not pass interference. If anything, it would have been pass interference against the receiver because he extended his arms fully against the defender, and that's usually offensive pass interference. On the flip side, Utah had a lot of penalties called against them that were just not penalties. And they were ones on like punt returns, kick returns, where you just don't need to throw those flags, even if the violation occurs. It has no effect on what's going on. So keep the flag in your pocket. The targeting call. So this is the big one. That was targeting. It was. The letter of the law, the rule, does not care about intent. It doesn't care about any of that. Lander Barton made a football play. Bear Bachmeier was trying to make up for a mistake. Even he said it. Bear Bachmeier said it in the post-game notes, where he said, I should have thrown the ball sooner, and so I went, I have to make a play. Well, that play that he made, it could have cost him his life with the way he got hit. And so physics happen, right? Bear Bachmeier gets tripped from behind. He's going down a little bit. He's flipping the ball out to get an incomplete pass. And Lander Barton's coming up to make a play. He's trying to hit the ball carrier. And then physics happen. I don't think Lander Barton meant to launch into the head of Bear Bachmeier. I don't. Lander Barton's a better football player than that, and he's smarter than that. It's just physics. Kyle Whittingham didn't like the call. If it went the other way, he would have loved the call. That's just the nature of it. That call alone does not really change the outcome of the game. It did a little bit. Obviously, you're removing one of the best defensive players on the field for both teams, and you're removing a captain. But you would expect a Utah defense to be able to absorb a blow like that and buoy up. They didn't. So the call alone did not change the game. Now, obviously, I haven't heard Utah AD Mark Harlan's thoughts on it, but I would assume they would be along the lines of, they stole the game from us. That's just my thinking, and maybe that's why they didn't give him a microphone. Overall, this game, I don't want to call it a tide shift in the rivalry, because BYU in this rivalry, historically, does not do well. There was the Lavelle era, but then outside of the Lavelle era, Bronco got punked by Kyle Whittingham repeatedly. Gary Croton could not beat Urban Meyer. And Kalani is basically the one with the best record against Utah since Lavelle Edwards. So it could be a watermark for what this rivalry is. And it's a BYU team that in the past coming into this game came in a little bit scared. They came in with alligator arms on those over-the-middle routes. And they allowed themselves to get pushed around. The past 3 meetings, that has not been the case. Satake has gotten this team to stand up for itself, to not be bullied. And with Kyle Whittingham, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's up to him when he wants to walk away. Anyone who says that he should retire, I understand where you're coming from. But without Whittingham, what is your program? If Whittingham doesn't take over after Urban Meyer leaves for Florida, where do you think your program goes? Because Utah's not a premier program. It kind of is now, but at the time it wasn't. Everybody assumed Utah was a flash in the pan. It was Urban Meyer magic, and now that he's gone, it's going to fall apart a la Bowling Green. Whittingham kept it all together. Whittingham got Utah to the Pac-12. Whittingham got Utah conference championships in the Mountain West and in the Pac-12. They're not even out of the Big 12 title race. Sure, BYU is 7-0, 4-0 in conference, but BYU has to travel to Iowa State next week. 2 weeks after that, they have to travel to Texas Tech. So by no means is Utah out of it. So Kyle Whittingham gets to choose whatever he wants. Has the game passed him by? Maybe. I just disagree with how he's built his program over the last few years. He's kind of gotten away from what made Utah, Utah. That's just my thoughts. But boy, those referees were bad, weren't they? For both teams. They were just bad. It's like the Big 12 just doesn't understand how crazy this game is every year, and they don't prepare their referees for it adequately enough. Maybe now they'll understand. And maybe now the Big 12 will move this game to the end of the year where it belongs. But that's the episode this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. And I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.